The challenging thing that we face in the education sector is a lack of access to translation and interpretation services, and that is oftentimes most evident when a family first arrives to school, and of course when a family has multilingual parents and one of the languages that's spoken by one of the parents or somebody at home is English, we can communicate with the family and find out about the child's learning capacity and learning competences. There's a huge amount of information gathering that takes place and should take place. And when there is a parent or a family member at home who can engage in that level of English conversation with us at school, that's really helpful. In the cases where they can't, that's where it becomes challenging, and so we have to use a lot of translation and interpretation software and try to get that information, because what we found happens in many cases is that those very early experiences that children may have in terms of not hitting their developmental milestones, or maybe having, difficulties with hearing or vision or other, challenges. Oftentimes parents may feel that by giving us this information, we may exclude them from the school or from the class. And that their child may wind up being in a special education setting, and that's not the case. We're very inclusive in Ireland in that sense. So it's really important to have a very earnest and honest conversation with the child's parents when they arrive and explain how the education system works here, the reason why we're asking those questions, and to find out as much information as we can about the child, but also about the family. What languages are spoken at home in the child's presence. In terms of assessment, that's the very first thing that we would be wanting to find out. In terms of assessment in general, the guidelines for primary school are quite rigid in terms of what formal assessments children must undergo, and a lot of times that can be quite a conflict for teachers and for special educational needs coordinators in school, because we are giving a child a piece of assessment that we know that they are unable to engage with, and so that has to be addressed in a really sensitive way, because you're giving a child a piece of reading comprehension which is way above their reading level, and they could probably understand that piece of reading comprehension if they were educated in their mother tongue or mother tongues, and then there might be a set of comprehension questions, for example. So we do give it to them, and if possible we explain to them that every child in the state has to be given this piece of assessment, and we know that you haven't acquired enough English, and I think it's a sensitive thing to maybe Google translate that piece into their own language and let them answer in their mother tongue, but we do actually have to have them sit that test. In terms of things like mathematics assessment, oftentimes children who are multilingual will really do well on the strand of number and computation, but they would have challenges with the questions that are related to language and that have a lot of language-rich terminology. It's really a challenge that all of us face in schools, including the National Educational Psychological Services, NEPS psychologists, when they come to school to assess a child who is developing multilingual, who also has learning challenges, to differentiate between what are learning challenges and what are language development. That's really something where you really need the expert help of, for example, a speech and language and communication therapist who comes from that mother tongue or that home language background, or an educational psychologist who speaks that child's mother tongue. And really that is the gold standard for assessing a multilingual child. Anything else is subpar, to be honest, because in that process of interpreting that goes on between the interpreter and the child and the psychologist who's speaking English and the interpreter, a lot of meaning is lost in that exchange. And so I think that that's something that we as a country can do better at. You show us how to make a star. So line up and down, and now turn the board around, and super, what's that?
A star.
Does anybody know any songs that have stars in them?
Yeah. I know Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Hang on one second. Yorkie, what's that?
My beautiful star.
Oh, do you know how to say star in your language? How do you say star in Mommy's language? in your language, in Georgian? How do you say the word for this? In my language, it's setore. Do you know how to say it in your language? Star, up in the sky with the moon. Do you know? No? Will I show you how to draw a moon? It's like a C and then another C inside. How do you say star in your language at home?
I forgot.
You forgot? That's okay. You're thinking hard.
Nachestar.
Nachestar. Oh, that's cool.
How about my one? Can I do a song? But I know how to say no in Croatian.
Tell me.
Ne.
Ne. I bet that you say that lots, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. In this video, I was working with a small group of children. I'm teaching them how to draw a star. We saw a young boy who is really just at the very early stages of acquiring English. I asked him the name of a star in his home language and that he speaks at home. And then I tried to associate that language that he speaks at home with his mother, because he associates that language with mommy's language. And he came up with star, and then finally he said another word in star, and then I modeled myself what I call it at home. And that was when he finally, I think, got it. What we find oftentimes is children are sometimes a little bit reticent to say a word in their mother tongue in a group that's mixed with children who are multilingual and children who are English speaking only, so that we can model through the use of using a word in Irish or using a word in our mother tongue that we as the teachers have, that you know, speaking another language is really interesting and cool, and look, I can do it too. But when you get into the CALP language, the content language, words for mathematics, words for science, words for academic language, probably that language isn't there. So what can we do as teachers? We can specifically target that language and ask parents to work on that language in the home language with them too, as we're teaching it in school. And there are a lot of factors that go into a child having language loss of their mother tongue. Sometimes that can be the fact that the child has a difficulty with switching context. So they associate school or preschool or early childhood setting with English, and they associate home or being out with their family members with their mother tongue or their home language. And that's quite normal. And so when we ask them even very simple things like colors and parts of the body in the mother tongue, they're unable at school to tell us what they are. And the parents sometimes tell us that the children don't speak English at all at home. And I assure the parents that they speak English very well at school, and the parents find this very hard to believe. Probably like most of you, I teach senior infants, like most of you, the first month of school, you're just trying to get to know the students and to see sort of what did they retain from the previous year of education. So this year I'm in senior infants as a set teacher. So there's a multilingual child in that class. Mum is an Urdu speaker and has acquired English as an adult, and the child, unfortunately, through the best intentions of the mum, the child doesn't speak Urdu. She does understand some very basic commands in Urdu and some very simple vocabulary, but mum, with the best intentions, spoke English to the child. And so the child doesn't have a solid and consistent, correctly spoken and grammatically correct L1, which is her first language or mother tongue. And so that's expressing itself in terms of English in misused gender pronouns, incorrectly used articles and plurals and tenses. So it becomes quite difficult with her because, again, you know, when she's trying to acquire, she doesn't have the basic interpersonal communication skills, and so then acquiring academic language on top of that makes it more complicated. So as part of the senior infants, the first month, we gave them some basic kind of assessments, and one of them was a basic infant baseline maths assessment. So in this case, for this child, the questions were, can the child identify which number comes after a number and which number comes before a number? So I'm just going to give you the script that happened. So I will play myself and I will play the student who's 5. So the question is, which number comes after 4? The other side of the number or this side of the number? Which number comes after 4? It's a 3, you know, the small one, the baby one. I'm 5. My number is 5. So as you can see, the child has a very confused notion. She would have been used to using a number line or manipulatives or blocks or all kinds of other things that we use to establish the sequence of prepositions of place and prepositions of number and before and after. So she doesn't understand the numbers when there's no manipulative or there's no concrete example that she can look at. So the question was reiterated to her, and she uses the motion towards her and away from her, which, as we all know, that doesn't indicate before and after. But that was where she was placing those numbers in her mind. And so she went to what she can relate to, which is her age. So the number after 4 in her age was 3, and the number before 4 was her age, which was 5. So she was confused, and she was actually doing them back to front. Now, I'm quite certain if I had given her a number line from left to right, she probably would have gotten that. But again, she doesn't solidly have the prepositions of place and the order of the numbers. And I do relate that very much to her lack of mathematical language and understanding in terms of English. So in this case, if we were to assess her in her mom's mother tongue, that wouldn't give us any more information than we have. But what it does elucidate to us is that the huge benefit that children can gain when their parents speak to them in their mother tongue from age 0 to school entry. Because if she had had that solid language, she would have learned all of that language around prepositions of place, prepositions of time, all of that type of language, gender language. And you might say, well, they might not have gender in mother's home language, but those types of complexities of language exist in all languages, not just in English, and she could scaffold those types of things onto English.